I've been working at one of the biggest cheddar producers for a long time now. This cheddar plant runs 24/7, 365 days a year. I work the night shift in the parts division, and it's quite delayed at times. We have a separate, enormous stockroom about 100 feet from the cheddar plant, where we keep the big items like engines, pumps, cylinders, and so on. We usually keep the stockroom doors open because nobody really goes into our stockroom except us parts guys. Our stockroom has those motion-activated LED lights that turn on when they detect movement as you walk underneath. There are about 35 lights spread throughout the stockroom, and they're on a timer, so they eventually turn off after 10 minutes of no movement. One night, while I was working, it was extremely windy and cold. It was a typical, quiet night, and it was around 1 a.m. I had to go to our stockroom to get an engine off the rack with a forklift. I opened the garage door and proceeded into the stockroom with the forklift. After entering, I saw that the LED motion light in the back corner of the stockroom was on. That corner was about 50 feet or more from me, and the other lights were off except for that one. It was a bit odd, but I didn't think much of it and began pulling the engine off the rack. Once I placed the engine on the bed, I heard footsteps from that back corner where the LED light was on. I called out, but there was no response. I thought maybe I was just hearing things. I drove the forklift out of the stockroom with the engine and took it to the maintenance guys. I chatted with them for about 30 minutes and took a cigarette break. 2. I finally went back to the stockroom around 2 a.m. to close the garage door I had left open. I walked over to the garage door and glanced towards the back corner of the stockroom. The LED light was off now. I closed the door and was walking back to the main exit when I heard footsteps again and saw the back corner LED light turn on, followed by a row of lights turning on as if someone was walking toward me. As the lights turned on, I saw a man dressed in all black emerge from the darkness. He had tattoos all over his face and looked straight into my eyes. I mumbled a few words, asking, "Who are you?" He stared at me silently. At 6 feet 2 inches, I felt like I could take him if he tried anything, but he continued giving me a menacing look. I told him he shouldn't be in here, but he said nothing and kept glaring. I called security on the radio and told them to come to the stockroom because there was an unauthorized person on the property. When he heard me call security, the man pulled a knife from his pocket, and I backed up, staring at the knife. He stood there, not moving. After a moment, we heard security outside the stockroom, and the man ran towards the side door. I stayed put as security rushed in and asked where he went. I told them he exited through the side door. They checked around the stockroom just in case, but they couldn't find him. Once 6 a.m. rolled around, I told my boss what happened, and he said he would review the surveillance cameras to see where the man went. The footage showed the man climbing over our barbed wire perimeter and entering our stockroom. Since that day, my boss has made us lock the stockroom doors every night. I often wonder what that guy would have done if I hadn't called security. I take my dog for regular walks around my neighborhood every evening after dinner. There's nothing particularly interesting about the walks. I just go around the block and back home. For context, I'm a woman in my late 20s, living in a middle-class neighborhood. The town is very safe with a low crime rate, and I've never felt like I was in danger in the 15 years I've lived here, except for one night. It was just after 7. I had a quick frozen dinner, then got my dog ready for a walk. It was winter, so it was already dark, but the town does a good job keeping the streets and sidewalks well lit with streetlights. I turned the corner onto a path that runs alongside a park. This is my usual route as it loops nicely back to my house in about 15 minutes. It was a quiet night, which isn't unusual during winter here. I was standing on the snowy sidewalk, watching my dog sniff around a tree, when I noticed a car parked on the road up ahead, right next to the walkway. Its headlights were off, but the interior light was on, and I could see someone moving around in the front seat. I tried not to make it obvious that I was looking at them, in case they noticed me, but I was curious about what they were doing. The area where they were parked wasn't near any houses, and it was a bit late and cold, so I wasn't sure what they were doing. I wasn't particularly worried, just curious. I pulled my dog's leash and started walking along the path again. As I got closer, I saw it was a man, and he seemed to be searching for something in his car, rummaging frantically through his glove box. I was still half looking and half turning away, trying not to be seen, when the man suddenly looked up and made eye contact with me. My first reaction was to look away, but then I looked back. I was only 10 or 15 feet from his car at that point. The man raised his hand in a friendly gesture and rolled his window down. "Excuse me, would you mind helping me with something?" he called out through the window. He looked around my age, so I asked him what he needed. He mentioned something being wrong with his car and said it wouldn't move, though he was using a lot of car terms I didn't fully understand. Either way, I wasn't much help. "Sorry, I can't really help with that," I replied, pulling my dog and starting to walk away. After taking a few more steps, I heard the faint sound of his window rolling back up, followed by the car engine turning on. A moment later, he drove off. I turned to watch the man drive his little car down the road as if there was no problem at all, which made my stomach drop. After a few seconds, I turned back and started walking a bit faster. I was still a few minutes from home, and my mind was racing, thinking about how unsettling it was to see him drive off like that after he claimed his car was broken. I continued for another 5 minutes down the path until I reached the end, where it goes behind a few houses before leading into a neighborhood that connects to my home. This section was darker and isolated. I walked even faster to get out as quickly as possible. But when I reached the end of the path on the dimly lit street, there was that same car from earlier. I could see the front of the car, and I recognized it instantly. It looked like he had parked in a way to avoid being seen. I turned around, pulling my dog with me, and started running in the opposite direction. When I got back to the park, I turned down a street that took a longer route home, keeping me closer to other houses. Thankfully, he didn't seem to follow me. My heart was still racing when I got home, and I called the police to report the man. But that's when I realized I hadn't taken down his license plate number. What's worse is that a few nights later, I saw that same car parked by the path where I walk again, though this time all the lights were off. Yet, I actually remembered it seemed as though he was parked in a way to avoid being seen. I turned around, pulling my dog with me, and started to run in the other direction, back the way we came. When we got back to the park, I turned down a street and took a long route home that kept me close to other houses. Fortunately, he didn't seem to follow me. My heart was still racing when I got home, and I called the police to report the man. But that's when I realized I didn't get his license plate number. What's worse is that a few nights later, I saw that same car parked again by the path I walked on. This time, however, all the lights were off. I called the police, who came and searched it, only to find that nobody was inside. When they checked the license plate, they found that it was actually a stolen vehicle. Knowing this gave me a sick feeling, thinking back on my encounter with that man. I'd always felt safe living here, but that night, I came close to something terrible happening to me. I often find myself wondering what that man was frantically searching for in his glove box. I don't know for sure what he wanted, but I definitely never want to find out. This happened last year. I was at home getting ready for bed after staying up late to finish work. I didn't have work the next day, so I decided to unwind with a shower. As I was rinsing off, I heard something click. It was faint, but it sounded like it came from inside the house. I thought it might be just a noise the house made, so I didn't worry about it and kept showering until I heard it again. This time, right outside the bathroom door. I quickly rinsed off, turned off the shower, and got dressed, trying to figure out what the noise could have been. Opening the door, I immediately noticed that the hallway light was off, even though I knew I had left it on. At first, I thought it was a power outage, but when I looked at the light switch on the wall, it was flipped off. A bit shaken, I quickly looked down both ends of the hallway, then flipped the lights back on. They worked as usual. I walked down the hall toward the stairs and saw it was completely dark downstairs as well. One light switch turning off by itself was strange enough, but two, that told me this wasn't a coincidence. Something was definitely going on. I stood at the top of the stairs for a moment, trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't know what was happening, but someone breaking into my house just to turn off my lights seemed like a really twisted joke for someone to pull. The longer I stood there, the more anxious and creeped out I became. I started walking down quietly, and when I reached the middle of the stairs, the loud sound of my back door slamming shut echoed through the silent house. I jumped, frozen in panic, my heart pounding. After a moment with no more sounds, I went downstairs and turned on the lights. On the tile floor, I saw clear boot prints, probably from the mud and dirt around my house. Looking down the hall toward the back door, I saw it was shut, but even from where I was standing, I could see it wasn't locked. I ran down, locked it, and then checked the front door, which was still locked. I knew I always kept both the back and front doors locked, especially the back door since I never used it. Strangely, all the windows were still locked and intact, so whoever it was must have figured out how to open the back door. I called the police in a hurry, but they were practically useless. They checked around the place and found nothing missing, nothing important that I would have noticed right away. Maybe it was just some sick joke, but whoever it was didn't even stick around to get a laugh at my reaction. So what was the point? Over the next few months, I was on full alert. Every sound the house made sent chills through me, and I became obsessive about locking my doors, checking them 4 or 5 times every night. Up until now, I still live in the same house and nothing else has happened, but just 2 months ago, I woke up and saw that the back door was open again. By then, I hadn't been checking the locks as consistently, so I figured I must have forgotten to lock it. But a part of me thinks it was that intruder again. There's also a part of my mind that wonders if it could be something paranormal, though I'm still not sure. Whatever it was they were trying to do still creeps me out, and I plan on moving far away very soon. Please like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube feed, Ghostly Gloom Stories.